And I really appreciate us having this conversation. I think I've shared on the podcast before, and I did tell you this when I was reaching out. When I was in college, my friend and I, we were on a website, because there was billboards near our college about joining. I don't remember what site it was. I actually messaged her and I was like, do you remember what site? And she doesn't remember either. But it was a site, and it said, join to get your college tuition paid. So we were like, looking back, like, I'm pretty prude compared to a lot of people, so I don't even know why. But like, we're on the site, like, okay, well, maybe we can, join and don't have to give sugar. Like, we're good conversationalists. That's what, we were thinking. So we're like scrolling. We didn't sign up, but we were like looking at some of the pictures, like, oh, this isn't what we thought it was going to be. Neither one of us actually signed up, but like, it does market to young girls. And the college tuition thing, I was like, now this is interesting. Now I'm intrigued. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That was one of our biggest marketing pushes while I was working for the company. It was called Sugar Baby University, and it was basically like a press angle. So when I was working there, I was a PR manager. And I mean, maybe some of your audience is familiar, but if you're not, a PR manager is basically a liaison between a brand and media. So I was acting as an intermediary using my internal website knowledge and my access to the website to then pick media, like news outlets, to then pitch the story to and place the story with different news outlets. So one of the biggest pitches was called Sugar Baby University, and it was a list of the schools or universities where there are the most sugar babies in attendance. And while I was working there, it was very overt. Like the marketing was like hypersexualized, and it was all about getting a rich benefactor to pay for your university tuition.
Yeah, or something
And
like that.
yeah, and it worked because it's salacious and it's sort of got that girl next door tie-in, like there's a sugar baby next door down at the university down the street from you. So there was a lot of different angles for it. And it also drew in members, like new members, like you were saying, how you were a student and you were thinking, oh, maybe I could get my university tuition paid for. So that's kind of what we wanted at the time. But also, most of the men on the website like young girls. And the idea of a young college girl really strikes their fancy. So that was the whole marketing angle. And at the time when I was pitching this, I was only 21, 22 years old, and I was fresh out of college myself. So I didn't really see the problem. But as I got older, those girls start to look younger and younger. And as I had my own coming of age while I was working there and thereafter, I began to realize how sick and disgusting it is that these men who are twice, three times my were even looking at me in that way. Because when you're young, you think you're grown up. You think you know it all, and it's only when you're older looking back that you can realize how dumb you really were back then. And not to call anyone dumb or anything like that. It's just you
I
don't
mean,
have the
you are when you're young. Sometimes
I
you
mean,
are dumb. It's okay.
and I was dumb. Oh my gosh, I was so
Yeah,
dumb. And but
same.
it's just so hard to, like you were saying, it's so hard to explain how you're going to feel later on, or explain like what the big deal is, because especially when someone's destitute, doesn't have money, paying for their own college, it's hard to explain that it's not easy money. And so that's part of why I wrote this book. And that's my intention, is I want people to read it and understand how their perspective might change. I wrote it in first person present tense. And I mean, you were reading it. It's a quick read. It's like a short vignettes. I kind of wrote it for people who don't really like reading very much, because I imagine a lot of my audience isn't really readers that I'm trying to reach with this. But I wrote it in present tense because I really wanted to have my inner monologue speak to the reader and show them how my perspective changed from when I was 14 to when I was 18 to 21 to then 27, when things start to look much differently. Because I just don't know if that's something that people can really wrap their heads around when they're so young. And like you said, they're, in dire straits. So I feel for them. I really do. But I also just want them to read this book before they decide to monetize their sexuality on the internet, be it OnlyFans or sugar dating or whatever.
Yeah. No, that's good. So let's talk a little bit about the breakdown of the type of, I guess, customers from the man's perspective. like statistically, how old were they? What type of professions? Are we probably walking across men that are like, I'll just say sick. I don't know how else to describe it. These type of sick men, are we walking past them every day? Are they our teachers? Like, what was kind of the breakdown of the customers?
It was all different kinds of people, but I think there is one through line, which is that these men are missing something, be it emotional maturity or intimacy. The majority of these men are married and they are cheating on their wives.
Yeah.
So that's something that a lot of sugar babies learn and they'll have to deal with if they're willing to date a married man. And another thing about them is they are looking to have easy sex. They don't want to have the emotional commitment. They don't want to be held accountable for bad behavior. And they don't want to have an emotional connection and emotional intimacy because I think most often they have their wife for that. So it's sex work. It really is. And these men are willing to pay for sex and they don't want to pay a regular sex worker because of one reason or another. But usually it's because they want someone who's naive and who doesn't have the perceived aura of someone who has been in the sex industry a long time. They want someone fresh and vulnerable and easily manipulated. And a lot of times they're not paying any money at all. They're just
Really?
looking, oh yeah, because they pick up where the marketing of the company leaves off. And they say that they'll take you on a trip or they'll give you this or they'll give you that, but they don't have any intention of giving you anything at all. They're using the site as an agency to easily get free sex from vulnerable young girls. And that happens time and time again. I would hear about that all the time. There's actually a New York Times piece that came out, I think in 2018, that kind of details what that looks like and what happens. And more often than not, when I would meet users of the site, which I did frequently when I was working there, they would have horror stories for me about exactly that happening, men lying to them, manipulating them. And most of the men on the website are not rich. They don't have the money or expendable income because, like, think about supply and demand. Like, there are not enough rich men to go around. And some wonderful rich man, like some Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, they don't need a website to find someone to spoil. That's kind of one of the conundrums we're facing right now in modern dating, which is that these high value men have so many options and can easily get sex very, very quickly. So why would a good guy, a rich guy who just wants to give you a bunch of money, like, why would he need a website? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And it's so interesting you say that because my brother and I sometimes talk about, my brother and I are 15 months apart, so we're close in age. So we talk about sometimes things that we see, like tweets and things like that. And we were talking about kind of what you just said about how, like, realistically, there wouldn't be a good man that just wants to give you money. And I remember thinking, my brother's like, duh. And I remember he laid that out and I was like, yeah, I guess it does make sense. But like initially I was like, well, there's people who have money. I'm sure they want to. But my brother's like, as a man too, he would know. But he's like, duh, that doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense. I think that we kind of sometimes we live in these fantasies, like you said, Pretty Woman, for example. We live in these fantasies. And I think it's hard to come to the realization that that's just not going to happen. And I like that you said this because like I said earlier, I think sometimes too, I've had conversations with friends where they're like, well, maybe I can be good conversationalist. Like maybe I don't have to give him any sugar, but it sounds like then he's just not going to talk to you. Like nothing will happen then. So I think that's just something for us to just think about and to remember that realistically, a really nice, good, rich man can find someone in real life. And there's no reason for him to be on a website, especially, and even thinking about this, like, especially a website where he just gives it away. Because even when I'm thinking too more about like the super rich people that I know that like I've run into, they are so savvy with their money. It is hard for me to believe that they would just give it away to some girl. Thank you for watching this clip of Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends. You can watch the full episode here on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.